everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm here to talk about and help newcomers understand when picking your PC components. Now, first of all, it starts off with what brand you want to use, Intel or AMD. Once you select which brand you want to use in your CPU, then you go on with it. After that, it's on the motherboard. How you want your motherboard to compute your PC needs. You got your basic, you got your mid-levels, and then you got your extremers. Basic users, PC users, are people like me. And what I mean by that, what I mean by basic users is one, we do not believe in overclocking. Two, we find a motherboard that is basically 2 sticks of RAM slots. RAM slots 2. Maximum 32 gigabyte or 16 gigabyte. 3, less capacitors, and we keep everything in auto. Now I'm gonna go ahead and start off with my build I did and the motherboard I choose for my needs. Alrighty, here we go. Let's get this presentation started. And the motherboard I choose for myself is the Prime A320MK, which is on a AMD Ryzen AM4. My chipset is a Ryzen 5 3600, 32 gigabyte of RAM. It has the M.2 slot. Now, when picking the M.2 slot, keep this in mind, newcomers. It's best to start off with 500 gigabyte or 1 terabyte. That's it. Now, when you use the M.2, you lose the first SATA port. That is not optional. You cannot use that first SATA port. So if you use the M.2, you gotta go SATA 2, SATA 3, SATA 4. The M.2 takes out that first SATA port. So let's get back into that. That's a good thing to go ahead and keep that into your memory there. When you go ahead and connect the M.2, especially on the lower motherboards that's non-clockable and only for basic users, you lose that first SATA port when you connect the M.2. Now, let's go ahead and get into why I say basic users like me, we pick boards like this. Now, here's your capacitors and your transistors, all right here. Notice no heat sink. CPU power is a 4-pin connect, 24-pin connect. When we pick a non-overclocking motherboard, it go ahead and give us our basic computing needs. And what I mean by basic, we keep everything in auto setting. We may go ahead and crank the memory to go ahead and give us that little extra oomph and speed, but the CPU cannot be overclocked. If you overclock a motherboard like this, you will burn these out. So basic users tend to keep everything at basic settings. We don't need the extra push. We don't need the extra power. We just keep everything maximum. Now, saying that, you got your mid-levels. Your mid-levels does a little overclocking. Their parts are a little extreme, especially when picking their motherboards. And I'm going to go ahead and get into the next one, which is the Intel socket board. Now, here is the H4470 Phantom Gaming 4. Here, your transistors, your heat sinks. Okay, this is for mid-levels. You got a 8-pin to 4-pin. You got your 24-pin. You have your M.2 drive and your Wi-Fi Connect drive as well. Why? This is mid-level because one, it has 4 DIMM slots. Mid levels uses 4 DIMM slots, and this is like the basic tier of it all. So for mid levels, you get your maximum of 128 gigabyte of RAM. You get your heat sinks, you got your capacitors. The more capacitors and transistors, that lets you know that the board is overclocking, and you get your overclocking parts. Now, run along to the specs, and this is where you know that you are not on somewhat to overclocking to non-overclocking because of the RAM. The highest power is 2933. To certain people, that is good for them to use just to play their basic stuff. You know, do their basic stuff. Now, if you're a photographer, you do your photography with your Adobe, Photoshop, etc., etc. If you're a business owner, you want to run your business software, such as your profit and gains, etc., etc. Gamers also use these boards as well to go ahead on and play the games they like. Now, extreme gamers. Yes, when I mean extreme pushes the limits. When I mean by push the limits, they push the limits. And when I mean push it, damn it, they push it. Here is the motherboard B550 Vision. I'm going to go ahead on and back that up a little bit because I went a little too far in the specifications. Alrighty. Now, this is where everything is glory to extremists. 1. Massive transistors, massive heat sinks. When your board pushes massive, it handles everything you need to do. Underneath here is your 8-pin to 4-pin connect. Yes, it's right up underneath here. You got a heat sink covering that. You got a heat sink covering all these massive transistors, and you got a heat sink covering your BIOS chipset. Now, with that said, going to specifications. Now, also keep in mind, these boards that a lot of streamers like to use because when they do builds in certain cases, like this here is a good white and black thing. They were teaming in all white with black trim, get their cable mods, black and white, perfect setup, put your GPU in there, black and white, RGB strong, everything is on. Now, this is one reason why I say extremists love these type boards. Now, the reason why extremists love it, because of this here. When you know you got a lot of transistors and capacitors, chunky heat sinks, and your DDR is 5100 OC overclocking, you could go ahead on and break the limits. You could go ahead on and say you got an erupting volcano, as I call them, volcanic PCs. When the extremists push the bar, they crank it to the levels that could be cranked, and they understand how to overclock their motherboards. Like me, I don't believe in overclocking. If I overclock anything, I will burn it out because I don't know the levels in overclocking. Now, if you're a first time builder and you want to overclock, I prefer to go ahead and watch some extremers that knows how to overclock their PC, so you can understand the overclock settings, so you won't burn your board out. If you set the power supply overclocking bar a little too high, you burning everything out. Memory get burned out, motherboard get burned out, transistors and capacitors get burned out. You might damage your power supply, and you're gonna damn near burn out your CPU. So yes, These are the boards that extremists like to use. Two, they love to use them because of the RGB settings. Now that's the B550. I'm gonna show you another one that also has heavy overclocking as well. Is I'm gonna go to Intel 1200 and I'm gonna go to the Z590. Let me see if I can go ahead and pick I'll pick the Z590 Extreme. Here's another one. As you see, all the heat sinks, transistors. The more heat sinks the board has, the more power this board delivers. This is why extremists understand what they're buying. Now, with these type motherboards, these are the more expensive motherboards. These type motherboards will run you $250 to $400 tops. And as you see, with all your heat sink spreaders that go ahead on the cover that keep the heat burning up the M.2s, you got your memory. There's your power supply 24-pin connect. Your 8-pin connect is sitting up into this top hand corner right here. You got your 12-pin, which is 8-4 plus a 4-pin connect. Here, this is where you go ahead and use a full modular power supply. So you can go ahead and connect all your cable wiring and then go ahead and start connecting it up with that as well. By doing that, look at the good transistors here. Look at all your PCIe lanes, connectors. Here's your M.2s right up in here. There's your BIOS chipset, and you see the word Extreme. These are what high-end production users and streamers use, because when they go ahead and push the levels and playing their games and streaming, production go ahead and push the levels and doing their 30-minute videos, know how to go ahead on there and bring things in, blur things in, and know how to fade things out. This is why extremists love these type motherboards, because they can go ahead and handle the barrier limits and they can go ahead and push. Now, after you pick your motherboards, whether you are a basic, mid-level, or an extreme, you go with the case. Now, a lot of people use Corsair because with those cases, you go ahead and pack a whole lot into it. That's the thing there. Understand your case. One, your case needs to be mesh. If there's no airflow getting into it, you are choking your parts. You are trapping your PC with a lot of heat. And when the more overheating it does, the more hard it works. The more hard it works, the more it blows itself out. So that's the main thing, is make sure that you get a case with open air design. You want the push, you want the pull, and you want the push. You wanted to pull air in, and you wanted to push the hot air out. So if you got the cooler again pushed in, it's cooling off your components and it's releasing all that heat out of it. So now you also got to keep in mind is how much hard drives it could hold, because you got to keep in mind externals are out, and I know that for myself. That's why I chose the do-it-yourself Cuboid build for one of my computers, and I chose the Rosewill Spectra C100. Now the Cuboid build holds two 2.5, two 3.5. That's 4, and with my motherboard holding the M.2, that's 5 hard drives pushing in that case. Now in my Spectra C100 by Rosewill, that holds 6 hard drives. It holds, well, basically it holds as much as you want it to hold. If you want to go SSDs, it holds 6 SSDs. Now in the 3.5 72 spin drive bay, you need to go ahead and buy your 2.5 to 3.5 drive bay connector. Install your 2.5 hard drives in, slide them into the 3.5 hard drive, screw them in. You got two on the back, and you got 2 on the inside. That's 6. That's why I chose those cases. The more hard drive it holds, the better. Why? Because externals do not exist anymore. They are a nuisance. So make sure that your PC case is mesh open and it holds as much as more than 4 to 5 hard drives. The more the hard drives, the better the case. So to the newcomers that's building, I'm glad to go over this aesthetics for y'all to understand on PC building. And also, before I close everything out, and also to go ahead on and understand what manufacturer you are you going with. My manufacturers are ASUS, Gigabyte, ASRock, and I do BioStar. BioStar is mostly on the basic side of everything to the more mid-extreme level side of everything. Now, just you know what? I want to mention now. Let's go ahead and pull up BioStar. As I can't sit down and say, hey, I can't leave them out. Those are the 4 type motherboards I use in my builds. My main builds is ASUS, ASRock, Gigabyte. Now, one thing with BioStar, it's hard to find their motherboards. That's why I don't hardly bitch them in my builds. But as you see right here, the new RAM, that's the Intel is right here. Same thing. This is what I'm talking about, beef right here. Here you got your CPU, which is 16 connect with your 24 with your 4 gigabyte of RAM. It's fancy, it's pretty, it's thumping, and these boards are hard to find by BioStar. You probably have to go ahead and contact the manufacturer to send y'all one out, or they go ahead and send you to a local store or retail store that sells them. This board is awesome. Now, this is one reason why when it comes to heat sinks, the beefier the heat sinks, the more power this baby put, because the more transistor it has. 2, when your board has features such as the power on and off switch and your BIOS update switch, that's a big plus in buying updated high-end motherboards. Now this motherboard runs the range about $250 to $325 to $350 retail price. These boards are beef chunks. These boards are not nothing to mess with. As you see, BioStar is pushing. This is why I love them. Those are the 4 brands I mess with. Now, that's another thing. When picking your aesthetics, make sure that when you pull up your motherboard info, so you know what your board is compatible with. If you don't do that, you're going to get a no boot screen and you're going to screw yourself over. Like I have read a lot of reviews where people did not update their BIOS and they screwed themselves over because they didn't get a post screen. Make sure you go to your manufacturer website, understand the parts. If you go on Intel or AMD, pick that. Then look through their little products and put a board up that meet your needs. I'm gonna go ahead and start off with one. Okay, we got the AMD Bristol Ridge. We are going with the AMD. We go with the Bristol Ridge. You know what? We're gonna go with this one here. Okay, that's the Z590. I'm going Intel. Okay, we're going silver. The B550M silver. Okay, it's an AMD board. They do Intel as well too. Now the reason why I say go to your manufacturer, because you can understand what CPU processor to put on it, what type of memory to put on it, and it gives you everything you need to know. Specifications. It goes 4th gen AMD Ryzen processors, Vimir CPU, support dual channel DDR4 up to 4400 overclocking. Some people may stick to, like me, I'll tell you, 3200 right here is good for me. Some people go ahead and push the limit, take it to 44 OC, or they go ahead and buy like Gigabyte or ASRock or ASUS, and they take it to 5100 automatic. That's your extremers. Anything that say overclocking is strictly for extremers. Anything that say 3200 all the way down to 1866 megahertz is for your basic to mid-level users. CPU model, support DX12, support HDCP, storage, total support 2 M.2s and 6 SATAs, 6 gigabyte ports. This is why I always go to my manufacturer. Once I pick which side I'm using, Intel or AMD, I go to my manufacturers, which is ASUS, ASRock, Gigabyte, or BioStar. Once I choose from those 4, I pull up the board I'm using and I look at the specs. If you don't do this here, you will screw yourself. 2, support. Know what your motherboard can handle. Here is an AM4. Now, here also pay attention to your TDP. If you plan on making upgrades, understand your TDP, because if you don't understand your TDP when picking your CPU cooler or your AIO, you're going to go ahead and undercut yourself, and you're going to be working your CPU cooler, which is not going to be cooling your processor properly, and you're going to be overheating. So make sure that your air cooler or your AIO holds over the thermal design power limit. Like here, and I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm on a Ryzen 5 3600. Here it is, Zen 5 30. It is 65 watt thermal design power. My CPU cooler is a 180 watt thermal design power handlage. So my CPU stays cool all day, every day, and I turned my CPU cooler into a double CPU blower. I got 2 fans on that bad boy, keeping that bad boy cool, no issues. When picking your air cooler, because I air cool everything, I don't believe in AIOs. When picking your air cooler, you want to feel the weight of your air cooler. If it's not feeling heavy, it's a little bit on the cheap side. The light your air cooler feels, the less the TDP is. The heavier your air cooler is, the more your TDP handlage is. Like, I had brought a Rosewell air cooler, and it's aluminum. It's light. The thermal design power on that is no more than 90 watts. So it handles Intel Core Duos processor, Intel Core 2 Duo processors only. That's 65 watts. So I know that CPU cooler can cool that because it's a 90 watt CPU cooler. So that's another thing. When you look at your aesthetics, make sure you understand your thermal design power. Now, right now, if I plan on upgrading And I say, for instance, if I want to go to Ryzen, and believe, and my BIOS is updated, so if I want to go to Zen 7 3700X, it's 65 watts. Or if I want to go to 2700X, it's 105. My CPU cooler handles up to 180 watts. If I go over 180, I will be causing my PC to melt down. So that's another thing. A lot of people don't pay attention to the thermal design power. So make sure that you understand your CPU thermal design power. Other than that, I pretty much cover basically everything. If y'all have any questions, go ahead on and hit me in the comment below. I love that there. Also hit the like button if y'all like this segment I pushed tonight. And I want to thank y'all for subscribing. I want to thank y'all for watching this great video. I got more great videos coming your way. Y'all stay tuned for them. And I love y'all. Y'all have a great, wonderful, blessed night. And peace.